During dinner, my husband slipped something into my drink. Unbeknownst to him, I swapped it with his mistress's glass, and within minutes, the truth unraveled. For years, Daniel and I were seen as the perfect couple in our small coastal town of Astoria. Together, we ran one of the most respected consulting firms in the area, our teamwork impressing clients and competitors alike. Our meetings were seamless, our results consistent, and outside the office, our marriage seemed to mirror that same harmony. There was no space for suspicion. Daniel was my partner, my confidant, my rock. I genuinely believed I was his. I had no reason to doubt him. No misplaced texts, no odd behavior. Our routine was steady, almost predictable, which might be why it took me so long to spot the fracture. It was a Tuesday, just after lunch. I was in my office, finalizing a report for a new tech client, when Mark, one of our veteran analysts, appeared at my door. He looked uneasy, his face pale, sweat beading on his brow. "Lydia, can we talk privately?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to follow. I nodded and shut the door. Mark wasn't one for theatrics. He was reserved, meticulous, the type who avoided conflict at all costs. Seeing him so rattled set me on edge. "Speak, Mark, what's going on?" He took a deep breath, pulled up a chair, and sat across from me, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know if I should say this, but I can't keep pretending I'm clueless." He ran a hand over his face, distressed. "Daniel's planning to push you out of the company." His words hit like a quiet bullet to the chest. For a moment, I thought he was joking, but his expression left no room for doubt. "What?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "He's arranging to transfer your share of the firm to another woman. It's almost finalized. The documents, the legal setup, everything, and she's not just an investor, she's his mistress." My breath caught. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process it. It seemed impossible. I knew every detail of Daniel's routine. We traveled together, worked side by side. When would he have had the time or the motive for something like this? "Are you certain, Mark? Could this be a misunderstanding?" "I don't have hard evidence, Lydia, but I've overheard conversations. Bits and pieces, things started adding up. Yesterday, I heard him on the phone mentioning this woman as our new partner. But the way he spoke, it wasn't professional. And he hinted you weren't supposed to know yet." I swallowed hard. Mark's voice faded as my mind replayed memories, moments, glances. I searched for any hint in our life together, but there was nothing. No suspicious messages, no emotional distance, no change in behavior. Nothing. Yet the seed of doubt was planted, sharp and persistent, like a splinter under my skin. "Don't tell anyone else," I said firmly. "And if you hear anything more, come straight to me." Days later, my suspicions transformed from a nagging echo into a stark reality, cold and sharp as a blade in the dark. It was an ordinary morning at the office. I'd just finished a video call with investors from Seattle when Daniel walked into the conference room with a calculated smile. Beside him was a woman I'd never seen, tall, poised, with a confident posture and a polished voice. She wore a charcoal dress that screamed professionalism, but her eyes told a different story. "Lydia, this is Elise, an executive I've been discussing potential growth strategies with," Daniel said, as if introducing a new vendor. Elise extended her hand with a firm grip and a smile that almost seemed genuine. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Daniel speaks so highly of you." I returned the smile, a practiced gesture, tight-lipped. Her use of "finally" struck me as telling, as if this meeting were the culmination of a carefully laid plan. We sat down. She launched into a presentation with surgical precision, growth projections, expansion opportunities, strategies for public sector clients. Every word, every term, flowed with rehearsed ease. Not a single stumble. But there was something in how she avoided my gaze for more than a fleeting moment. Something in the brief pauses between her points. "And how exactly do you plan to contribute, Elise?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral but my eyes locked on her. She smiled, her lips curving slightly with a hint of arrogance. "My experience in mergers and acquisitions will bring a bolder, more competitive edge. Daniel and I have discussed how to elevate the firm." "Did he share our internal figures with you? The quarterly reports?" I cut in calmly. "Interesting. I wasn't aware we'd shared confidential data with outside consultants." Daniel jumped in, laughing awkwardly. Oh, it was just a casual exchange of ideas. You know how excited I get about projections. I nodded, feigning acceptance. Outwardly, I kept my composure. Inwardly, certainty grew like a knot in my chest. Elise wasn't here by chance. This wasn't a proposal, it was a declaration. The meeting dragged on, but I stopped listening closely. My focus shifted to their body language. The way Daniel looked away when Elise spoke of strong partnerships. The way she said, "we and your company," slipping occasionally into "our," as if she'd already claimed her place. This wasn't just a mistress. It wasn't just an affair. It was a replacement. A calculated move to take my place, not just in our marriage, but in the firm, in the legacy Daniel and I had built. 2 days after that cursed meeting, I sought out Mark again. I waited until the office cleared out and called him to the file room, away from prying eyes and ears. When I shut the door, he knew why. "Have you found anything else?" I asked, no preamble. He hesitated, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape. He was more nervous than before, hands clammy, eyes red. Something was eating at him. "Lydia, I should have told you sooner. But this is serious. Very serious." I stayed silent, waiting. "There's talk that Daniel's planning to force you to sign over your shares. Not cleanly, though." I stepped closer. "What do you mean?" "I overheard them in the hallway, thinking no one was around. They mentioned using some kind of substance. A sedative, maybe. In your coffee, your wine, something to make you sign without realizing it." My stomach churned. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a scheme. A cold, calculated crime. Who else knows? I don't know, I just caught whispers. But Lydia, they're moving forward. They're just waiting for the right moment. I took a deep breath, fighting to stay composed. Mark had no reason to make this up. He was the type to steer clear of trouble. If he was telling me this, it was because he couldn't stay silent anymore. "Thank you," I said. "Now listen carefully. Don't mention this to anyone. If anyone presses you, deny everything. Leave this to me." He nodded, swallowing hard, and left like a man carrying a live grenade. I stood there, frozen, absorbing the weight of his words. This was no longer a suspicion. It was a clear and present danger, and I was the target. The pieces clicked into place. Daniel's rush to introduce Elise as a partner. Their subtle familiarity. The way he dodged handling documents with me lately. They were setting the stage, and the strike was imminent. But they miscalculated. They underestimated the woman they were up against. If Daniel thought he could drug me, manipulate me, and push me out of the firm like a minor obstacle, he'd forgotten who he'd shared a decade of leadership with. Something inside me ignited. Not just anger, but instinct. Survival, preservation, retaliation. I had to be faster than them, more discreet, colder. The invitation came as if nothing was amiss. Daniel came home smiling, his face relaxed, as if he were still the devoted husband I'd met years ago. He walked into the kitchen, tossed his keys on the counter, and spoke like we were colleagues discussing a new deal. "Elise is coming over for dinner on Friday," he said. I thought it'd be nice to talk business casually, at home, no pressure. Discuss strategies, align ideas. She's got some fresh ideas for restructuring. I nodded, suppressing the urge to react. I looked at him steadily and replied with the same calm I'd use with a key client. "Sounds like a great idea." He smiled, pleased. He thought he was in control, but I was already steps ahead. I didn't just want to understand their plan. I wanted evidence, and I'd get it without raising a whisper of suspicion. The next morning, I drove to a nearby city. I visited a small electronics shop and, under the pretense of upgrading our home security, bought 3 tiny cameras. The clerk explained their features briefly. I didn't care about the specs. I needed clear visuals, audio capture, and absolute discretion. The next day, I studied the layout of our home. The dining table sat centrally, near the glass cabinet. I hid one camera among the books on the shelf, another inside a decorative lamp, and the third in a side table, angled directly at where Daniel typically poured drinks. I set everything up at dawn, with him asleep in the next room, unaware. I tested the recordings. Flawless, sharp visuals, clear audio. There could be no errors. The evidence had to be undeniable. On the day of the dinner, I treated it like any other. I went to the office, chatted with staff, reviewed contracts. I avoided meeting Daniel's eyes. I couldn't afford to show tension. I returned home in the late afternoon and prepared meticulously. The table was set, silverware aligned, wine bottles chosen. I cooked myself, not to impress but to control every detail of the setting. I knew he'd use this dinner as his trap. I just decided to beat him to it. The clock read 7:47 p.m. when I heard the car pull up. I glanced out the window. There they were. Elise stepped out first, exuding the confidence of someone who thought herself untouchable. High heels, hair pinned up neatly. Daniel followed, opening her door like a second-rate gentleman. My blood simmered, but I swallowed my anger and went to greet them. I opened the door with a practiced smile. "Welcome," I said. Elise smiled softly, scanning every corner of the house as she entered. "Lovely to meet you, Lydia. Such a warm home, thank you." "I hope dinner is too," I replied, leading her to the dining room. Daniel seemed off, not nervous yet, but working to keep things light. He shrugged off his jacket, handed over a bottle of wine like it was a peace offering. "Brought that Cabernet you love," he said. "Thoughtful," I answered. "It'll pair well with the meal." As we sat at the table, I knew this night would be unforgettable. Daniel smiled like a man in command. Elise spoke as if she owned the moment, seemingly convinced she'd soon own everything. "I'm thrilled about the firm's future," she said, glass in hand. "There's a fresh energy in the air." I had to stifle a laugh. The only thing getting refreshed tonight was the guest list at the county jail. Daniel poured the wine, acting like he was toasting to camaraderie. But I caught the move. Quick, subtle, he tampered with my glass. He fussed with the bottle, but his intentions spilled out with the liquid. The fool thought he could drug me in my own home, with my own glass. I stood, fetched some napkins, and when I returned, I made the switch. My glass became hers. Elise didn't notice. She raised a toast, smiled, and took 2 long sips. Minutes later, she began to falter. Her eyes grew heavy, her words slurred. I held back, watching to see how far this would go. It didn't take long. "Daniel," she mumbled, her voice dragging, "when are you making my role official?" He stiffened, but Elise pressed on, giggling, her eyes half closed. "Lydia's signing, right? We planned it all. She won't even know. One day she's out, just a memory." Daniel tried to cut her off, but it was too late. She was unraveling. She laughed, dropped her fork, nearly tipped her glass. "Always wanted my own firm," she slurred. "But none of that startup grind. Way easier to take one already built." She turned to me with a lopsided grin. "Nothing personal, Lydia. Just business." "You're out, aren't you?" I took a slow breath. I stood and locked the door. The sharp click of the bolt was the final nail. Daniel jumped up. "What's this, Lydia?" I turned calmly, facing them both. "I know everything. The drug and the wine. The forged documents, the plot to push me out like I'm some replaceable intern." Daniel froze. "You weren't supposed to notice," he muttered. "It was just a clean exit. You sign and it's done. No mess. Clean for who? You and your scheming sidekick." Elise let out a misplaced cackle, slapping the table. "This house is spinning," she said, staring at the ceiling. "I'm painting it all green. Matches my leadership vibe." Daniel stepped closer, trying to sound rational. "Lydia, I messed up. I went too far. We can still talk this out." I crossed my arms. "The only talk now is with the police. By the way, the camera on the shelf's been recording this whole circus." Daniel paled. Elise started humming something like a corporate jingle. "My office'll be in the middle, with a killer view." Elise Consulting sounds catchy, right? That's when Daniel realized he wasn't facing a betrayed wife. He was facing the woman who'd orchestrated his downfall. "I've lost everything, haven't I?" he said, defeated. "You lost it the moment you thought I was expendable." I picked up the phone. It was time to end the meal. Within 15 minutes, 2 police officers were at the door. Elise could barely stand. Daniel, beside her, looked like a man on the edge, still upright but broken. "Good evening," one officer said. "We got a call about attempted fraud and breach of trust. May we come in?" "Please," I replied with the courtesy reserved for guests. I handed over the recordings right then. Memory card, 3 angles, crisp audio. The officers reviewed the footage on their laptop. It showed Elise, Daniel spiking the wine, Elise confessing the scheme and laughing about stealing my company like it was a clearance sale. It's all here, I said. I can provide the originals tomorrow. Elise mumbled about lawyers and mix-ups, but she could barely focus, her head lolling. The officer steadied her arm, firm but gentle. Daniel didn't resist. Knowing denial was futile, he lowered his head and offered his wrists, as if expecting the cuffs. Daniel Harper and Elise Monroe, you're under arrest for attempted fraud and breach of trust, the officer stated. I watched them leave, strangers exiting my home. No regret, no relief, just the quiet hum of justice in motion. The news spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, the story was all over the firm. I didn't need to say a word. The footage spoke for itself. The scheme was real, the betrayal dirty, and the target, me, had countered with precision. I got dozens of messages. Some offered support, others expressed shock, and a few came with awkward silence from those who'd been close to Daniel. The opportunists vanished. The loyal stayed. The following Monday, I walked into the office with my head high. No one doubted me. People looked at me with respect, some with awe, a few with fear. The conference room was empty. Daniel's name was already gone from the internal directory, like he'd never existed. The legal process moved forward. Elise and Daniel were released pending trial, but the fallout didn't wait for a verdict. They lost contracts, clients, and their carefully curated reputations dissolved overnight. A board member from a partner firm called me. Lydia, you did what needed doing. Facing that kind of betrayal isn't easy. You were surgical. I thanked him with a smile. Surgical, I liked that. I wasn't a victim. I was strategic. Unlike Elise, I didn't need to tear anyone down underhandedly. I just let them try and fail. They fell, hard, and recorded. Even with ironclad evidence, the legal system moved at its usual pace. Both were free pending trial, but freedom was just a word. Their reputations crumbled long before any ruling. Elise tried to keep up appearances, posting on social media about fresh starts and lessons learned, as if she'd gone through an amicable split. But no one bought it. Clients dropped her, colleagues cut ties, and the event invitations she loved to flaunt stopped coming. Within weeks, she was gone. She gave up her leased apartment, deleted her professional profiles, and vanished from Daniel's life like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. Daniel, meanwhile, stayed to face the wreckage. Jobless, firmless, and partnerless, he turned to his only remaining ally, his younger brother, Ethan, whom he'd mocked at every family gathering for running a small shop. Now that failure offered him a couch, a thin mattress, and a closet with a few hangers. And Daniel had to be grateful. His reputation in town shifted. Once a respected entrepreneur, he became a topic of hushed gossip. No more calls for business advice or features in local papers. When he passed our old office, he looked away. He'd been erased without anyone needing to say it. I didn't look back. Once the dust settled, I called a meeting with the remaining partners. I reviewed contracts, cut ties with shady associates, and restructured the leadership. I brought in 2 new partners, quiet, capable, loyal. The firm would no longer be a stage for personal agendas. It would be strong, efficient, mine. I led with resolve, but never again with blind trust. Daniel's betrayal didn't just leave a scar, it left a lesson. The enemy might sit at your table, toast with your glass, carry your name. I learned. Not easily, not softly. I learned by losing my footing for a moment, but never my core. Today, what I build endures, and more it thrives. Because now I see past the surface. And I made a vow. No one will try to take what I've built without falling alongside me. In the end, Lydia didn't need to raise her voice, just the right glass. So tell me, who was more foolish? The husband who thought he was untouchable, or the mistress already picking out decor for the office?